So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Veronika Pazderová, and I'm a PhD student at the Comenius University in Bratislava. And my today's talk will be about the role of meteorite ablation spectra experiments in the study of meteoroid composition. So, this presentation will be divided into 4 parts. The first one, very brief one, we'll deal with AMOS system, which is a global system for observation of meteors. Then, secondly, and most importantly, we will talk about the experiments which we did with simulated ablation of meteorites and the results of these experiments. And finally, before the end of the presentation, we will talk more about the specific ways which we want to employ these results in the study of meteors. So, since 2007, FMPH, our faculty, operates the AMOS global system or global network, which was developed for the global observation of meteorites. This network consists of systems, of all sky video systems, which are usually accompanied by spectrographs. And such pair you can see in the photo here. And these systems allow us to study almost every aspect of meteor phenomena, whether it's their dynamics or composition. As I mentioned, AMOS is a global network, and its layout you can see right here. We have stations in Slovakia, Canary Islands, Hawaii, Chile, South Africa, and Australia. As for the quantity of observations, a single station can observe approximately 20,000 single station observations a year. And as for the double station observations, it's somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 observations. During the existence of this network, we obtained a lot of observations, and they amounted to quite extensive database of all sky and spectral observations. And my team and I, we focus on the spectral part of the network. So one of our current objectives is the research of the composition of meteorites and the research of new spectral diagnostic features, which we then can use in describing their composition. Okay. So I mentioned the simulated ablation experiments. So these experiments were performed during the past years, and they involved simulated ablation of meteorite samples in plasma winds tunnel at IRS in Stuttgart. And they are, well, these data we obtained are very unique because what they are sort of analogs of meteors ablating in the atmosphere. So what we did, we took more than 2,000 samples of meteorites of various material types. We ablated them, and then we checked for the spectra. These experiments were observed by many different devices for various purposes, but we focused, as I mentioned already, at the spectral part, and the spectra of meteorites were captured by 2 spectrographs. First of all, there is AMOS one, which we install on our stations around the world. And then there is a high-resolution Echelle spectrograph. And as you can see, the Echelle spectrograph has a resolution that is almost 20 times higher than that of AMOS. So we have a unique opportunity to compare these two. And one such comparison for Košice, ordinary chondrite, you can see here in the slide. So during the project, my colleagues analyzed 28 meteorite samples, and their spectra we later examined for the new diagnostic spectral features, which we could use for the meteorites or meteoroids, to be correct. And as for the material types, there were 17 of them. So that means that we tested mostly chondrites, but our samples also included achondrites, HID group, Martian meteorites, lunar meteorites, iron one, and so on. And the next such comparisons between AMOS and actual spectra you can see here, specifically for Eagle ancestite and Mount Joy, which is an iron meteorite. So the value of this data for us stems from the fact that, as I said, these meteorite samples are for us analogs of asteroidal meteors. So we know that meteorites are a group of objects which have a long history of study, and they are very well classified. So it is a great opportunity to analyze and compare meteorites with well-established taxonomy with meteor spectra, which are not so well classified. So that's our current task right now. From the project, I didn't mention its name. It was called MedSpec. It was ESAPEX project. We tested and obtained 17 reference spectra, which we now aim to use in the AMOS data for meteors. And according to this, we were able to comprise a table, if you want, where there are all unique features which we can find for every single meteorite type we tested. And what we assume that is that considering the origin of meteorites and meteorites, we think that these features can be applied for both. So there's the connection. When it comes to meteoroids or meteors, perhaps the most often used classification, spectral classification, is the one developed by Borovička et al. And it is based on relative intensities of selected multiplets of iron, magnesium, and sodium. But although they are surely the most dominant and also most numerous lines or multiplets in the meteor spectra, there is a profusion of different species. They are listed on the top. And what we would like to do is to find new spectral lines which we could use in the classification. Okay, so now let's move to the results. In the table on the right, you can see all the spectral features or multiplets or lines which we want to study in meteor and meteorite spectra, which whose relative intensities we want to measure and which we would like to use later in the composition estimation of meteors. Now, as of now, our work was mainly focused on finding differences between different meteorite types. So if you look at the plot in the presentation, you can see that, for example, when we consider iron and magnesium, the Albright we tested right here in the left lower corner seems to be significantly different from the eucrite we tested, which is exactly on the opposite side of the plot. And this plot shows that we are immediately able to see differences between very distinct types of meteorites. When we move from iron to magnesium to silicon and magnesium, we can see something similar. we can see that, for example, the lunar meteorite is very much distinct. But what we can see easily, and we saw it also in the previous plot, is that there is a clump or cluster of a lot of meteorites. And that actually suggests that although we are able to see very distinct meteorite types in these plots, we are not able to see more subtle details. As you can see, for example, a lot of ordinary chondrites and carbonaceous chondrites are just clumped together, and it is very difficult to somehow differentiate between them. So if we take only, for example, if we take these plots, which represent some relationship between, for example, 2 or 3 spectral features, we can't see the more subtle details, and that can be problematic. Also, this type of plots, where we relay the spectral data with bulk composition that is published in literature, shows a good correlation between this data, and that's also kind of validation of our spectral data. And last but not least, we have similar plot for hydrogen. And among all those tested samples, the most consistent and strongest hydrogen emission was found in carbonaceous chondrites, and also some special kinds of achondrites. And as you can see, the differences between the hydrogen content of few subtypes of carbonaceous chondrite can be indicative of the special type. So that means from this plot, we could actually be able to recognize between the subtypes of carbonaceous chondrite, which is great. And the further very good thing is that although we tested 17 material types of meteorites, there was no sample where we detected hydrogen in ordinary chondrites. So that posed a further useful constraint for composition estimation. Another great way to display the relative intensities of several features or multiplets are ternary diagrams. So here we are. In the left, you can see the relative intensities of selected multiplets of manganese, silicon, and magnesium. And right away, you can see that, again, we have meteorites which are separated immediately. For example, here in the left, it's a lunar meteorite. And again, we can see also those clumps, for example, here for ordinary chondrites. And let's say we measure some kind of sample, and if relative intensities of measured features put it somewhere between those ordinary chondrites, we have practically no chance to recognize what kind of ordinary chondrite it actually is, whether it's H, L, or LL. We have no idea. This is just the two coarse method for this distinction. On the left, there is exactly the same situation. And besides a rather loose cluster of chondrites, all types of chondrites, we can easily distinguish tested Albright, Norton County, which is obviously very magnesium rich, and somewhat obviously iron rich iron meteorite, Mount Joy. The same intensities, of course, can be displayed on ordinary graphs. So this is just some kind of reproduction of what we see in the ternary ones. As you can see, again, there are clusters of ordinary chondrites and distinctive other types, for example, the lunar one. And here for the relative intensities of iron, magnesium, and chromium, again, the loose, rather dense cluster of chondrites in general, and some distinctive ones. The further problem with these clumps are the fact that if we consider the influence of conditions in the ablating plasma, it is even more complicated because every single electron transition or multiplet or line is sensitive to temperature and optical depth of the plasma in a different way. And that exhibits itself as slight differences between the intensities of lines. And without proper modeling of the spectra, we have practically no way to really differentiate between the chondritic types. So we'll have to work on that. But nevertheless, from all our analysis, we were able to compose this table where you can find specific spectral features for specific material types we tested. And we would like to use this as a reference for AMOS meteor data. So this is what we will look for there. And according to that, we will try to say that some kind of measured meteor is some kind of material type. So yes. What I mentioned only briefly is that because we tested meteorites, we will try to focus on asteroidal meteorites, meteors. So we will, of course, also focus on the cometary ones because there may be significant differences between them, but our focus for now are asteroidal meteorites. What we need to do now is to establish the procedure that would allow us to somehow do this recognition for meteors. But as we have seen, there is a great variety of possible multiplets or lines we can use. And there is a lot of combinations we can do from these relative intensities. So as for now, without the modeling, it seems that what we need to do is to not just use one such plot or one such measurement, but combine them in some convenient way. We will see in which way, and we will then be able to differentiate, hopefully, between these material types. There is one last thing, and that's related to meteor showers with known parent objects. As I mentioned, we will primarily focus on asteroidal meteors. And there are some showers which have known parent objects, specifically NEAs. And there may be a possibility to compare our results based on meteorites with some kind of indications for the surface composition of this parent object. So that may be an interesting possibility. And also, if we would find out that asteroidal meteors have a very distinctive spectrum when compared to cometary ones, we will, of course, explore also these differences. So most of the work, well, not most, but a lot of work on meteorites done. It's now time to apply them on AMOS data. And the first thing which we want to do, and which we already do, is the investigation of new spectral features that we could use. Then, as I mentioned before, we would like to design the best possible analysis procedure according to meteorites, which will help us with meteorite types, meteorite composition estimation. And the last thing we want to do is the more detailed characterization of meteor showers based on AMOS data, and hopefully with the consideration of these meteorite-based findings. And last but not least, there is a modeling of the spectra, which our team works on. It needs further testing, further effort, but we hope that when we will finish with it, we will be able to differentiate also between the closer spectra. For example, those ordinary chondrites I mentioned, which we cannot somehow distinguish now. And that's it. Thank you for your attention.